Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wrestling Academy, a podcast all about wrestling history with no linear timeline or trackable syllabus. So, if you're a lifelong fan or you're brand new, this is the podcast for you. I am your headmaster. My name is Michael Classic.
Oh, and hello. My name is Samee Junio, and I am the Homecoming King here at Wrestling Academy. We are a fairly new podcast, and we've got some goals. And one of our goals is to get over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And so if you're listening to us, head on over to youtube.com at Wrestling Academy Pod and follow us. And as an incentive, I'm going to put Michael through a table once we reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube.
And Samee, I got to ask you.
Yes.
When we reach our 1,000 goal and you put me through a table, are you going to start going, hacha, 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 like Mankind after doing research for today's episode?
This is what I'll do. When I'm setting up the move, which is still a mystery to the both of us, I'm going to go, and then like struggle around. And like I will wear a very sexy Fendi brown bodysuit as Mankind does, though. Fenty.
So, in addition to trying to reach this 1,000 subscriber milestone, we are also trying to solve a mystery. And that mystery is, who is Ween Kid? If you're just tuning in, ever since we saw Royal Rumble 2008, we have been fascinated by a mysterious phantom lurking in the background of every shot. We've named them Ween Kid, and that's all we know for sure about them is they make funny faces, and they were wearing a Ween t-shirt in 2008, and we have set off on a nationwide, worldwide search to try to find out who is Ween Kid. So if you have any information, you can reach out to us on any of our socials. You can go to our website, wrestlingacademy.university, or you can call our anonymous Ween Kid tip line. That number is 708-669-4512. Again, 708-669-4512. Any tip that will lead us closer to Ween Kid is greatly appreciated. But Samee, I feel like we're breezing through the intro right now because we are in the middle of our month-long exploration of Mick Foley in all of his various forms. Last week, we covered his dangerous Cactus Jack persona. We got into his career in WCW and ECW. And this week, we are going to continue that exploration by diving headfirst into his Mankind persona.
How did this week of research treat you, Michael?
This was a deep pool that I dove into, and I just was consuming every single piece and scrap and match that I possibly could, trying to just learn everything I could. And I feel like the reason I kept going is the more I learned, the more fascinating it became. And I needed to know more. And I feel like I OD'd on Mankind. At a certain point, you had to be like, Michael, you need to rein it in because you're getting...
Right.
You're getting out of control here.
This is really our thinking when we separated Mick Foley into 4 different episodes. So last episode, we covered Cactus Jack right up to 1995. And on April 1st, 1996, Mick Foley debuted as Mankind.
So if you're following along in sequential order, where we last left off with Mick Foley, he was on a white-hot run in the up-and-coming hardcore promotion ECW as the character Cactus Jack. And he was in the middle of doing his anti-hardcore gimmick. So Cactus Jack was known for death matches, violence, weapons, blood, all that kind of stuff. But when he turned into a bad guy, he decided the way he would antagonize the hardcore ECW audience was by being anti-hardcore. He only liked companies like WCW, and the reason why he specifically targeted WCW is he knew it would antagonize the ECW fan base, but he also knew that he didn't have a shot in hell of ever working for a big major company like the WWF. He had been applying, every year, just checking in, seeing if anybody was interested, and he was pretty roundly rejected every single year. And so he was reaching this point in his career where he's as popular as he's ever been in ECW, but it's still a small time gig. And so he's supplementing his income by splitting time between ECW and then flying to Japan to do deathmatch wrestling. And he's basically like, I don't know how sustainable this specific life is of like being an independent wrestler. He's got a family, he's got children, and he's trying to sustain that life by doing this wrestling. And he's just like, look, the reality was I was just not making the paycheck that I needed to be able to support my family and still be a wrestler. He was really considering like this might be where I have to hang things up and call it quits. And then he gets a call from his old friend Jim Ross, who we would recognize from the 1992 Beach Blast match against Sting.
Not
Jim
a
Ross.
chance!
Jim Ross was one of the commentators, but he had since moved from WCW over to the WWF, and he was a huge Mick Foley supporter. He had been pitching like, we need to get Cactus Jack in the WWF. He is like exactly what we've been looking for, because he saw something really special in Mick Foley in his ability to elevate big names like Sting, like Big Van Vader. And they really needed somebody with his special set of skills to elevate The Undertaker, who it's kind of unheard of at the time, but in 1996, people thought that the Undertaker character was starting to get a little bit stale. And they're like, we don't know if this guy has sustainable legs. I mean, cut to 2024 and he just retired, but
that's crazy.
Yeah, but in the 90s, they were like, yeah, we really need to figure out a way to challenge this guy. And we're sort of running out of big, credible threats. And that's when Jim Ross was like, I know just the guy. We need to get Cactus Jack. So Mick Foley gets this call, and it was truly his back was against the wall, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to make a living at wrestling. And then here he is, this company he's been trying to work for calls him and is basically like, hey, we want to get you in here to have you wrestle one of our top guys. And it sounded like a dream come true, to be completely honest. But here's what Mick Foley did not know at the time. The owner of the company didn't like Mick Foley at all. He didn't think he had the look. He didn't think he had the physique. He didn't think he had the talent.
Sounds like this guy sucks.
Yeah, it sounds like this guy should be in jail.
Interesting that we say this.
Mick Foley just really didn't fit any of the muscle man criteria that this particular booker was looking for. But Jim Ross was so adamant. He kept pushing. He was like, we need to get Cactus Jack. And then almost as a dare or an insult, the agreement was basically like, okay, I will bring in Cactus Jack so you can see what it feels like to have your heart broken by a talent that you had high hopes for, and then you see that they don't amount to anything. So they agree to bring in Mick Foley under one condition. The owner is like, I will bring him in, but I'm going to cover his face.
Oh, God.
What would you do if you get hired for the WWE and you found out that it was basically only so that they could do the plot of She's All That to you for real?
To be completely honest, I might love that. Are you kidding me? I've put a wig on. I know. I know what I could be.
You hired me as a bet? As a fucking bet?
I was just laughing to myself, actually, when you're talking about that. Like, just thinking about having children, having a life partner recognized by the state, be like, hey, I'm off to work and your work is wrestling. That's crazy. People still do that.
People do that, but also Mick Foley is, you know, he gets his briefcase and he hobbles in and then gets thrown off a ladder into barbed wire. That's what his whole thing is. So
that's wild.
You know, then he comes home and there's that story from when he flew back and he smelled like burning skin, and his wife was just like, honey, what smells? And he had to be like, it's me.
It's several layers of my skin. That's fucked up. All right. So he agrees to don the mask. So let's talk about his debut. It was Monday Night Raw, April 1st, 1996. He debuts in a match against Bob Sparkplug Holly. We've talked about Bob Holly before. I did not know that Bob Holly went by Sparkplug for a little bit, and I did not know that Bob Holly had such long, beautiful hair.
Yeah, I believe, Sammy, when we checked in with Bob Holly, he was hardcore Holly, and he had a bleach blonde buzz cut.
He sure did. He did.
And he was not into race cars anymore. He gave all that up for hardcore wrestling.
Okay, Bob. Well, unfortunately, Sparkplug loses, and basically Mankind had the upper hand the entire match and through to the end because he shoved his hand right into Sparkplug Holly's mouth for the win. So we all know, we're familiar with Mankind now. And it seems like his debut, he's already locked in his mandible claw finisher, which is just...
Take me through it, because that is not a carryover from his Cactus Jack character. When he
No.
gets brought in as Mankind, that's when he debuts the new submission, the Mandible Claw, which is he takes his hand and shoves it into his opponent's mouth. How did that strike you seeing that?
Well, let's just break down who Mankind debuted as, because I've never watched this debut match ever. So this is like just a blank slate of a person receiving this Mankind wrestler. So he strikes a monstrous silhouette, kind of hunched over to one side. He definitely favors one side. His long, curly hair, but it's all, again, favored to one side. He's got patches missing. And he adds to those patches during this very short match because he starts tearing at his own hair the entire time. And his mask is more like straps of leather rather than a whole face covering. And he looks out of one eye. It kind of seems like he favors one eye even though both are exposed. And he tilts his head up so that his favored eye is always up. The way that he looks out of the mask kind of feels like in cartoons where somebody's like trapped in there or they're shipping themselves to somewhere and there's only one hole and that one hole is for breathing and looking in. So it's just it kind of just feels like a disembodied like eyeball that he's rolling around looking through his mask.
And he's got a very creature-like, subhuman, Igor feeling physicality, whereas Cactus Jack, I think, was a lot more unhinged and cocky and a little bit confident, whereas the Mankind character, when he comes in, is this, hunched over, doesn't stand up straight, rocking back and forth, ripping out his own hair, unhinged dude.
Yeah, he doesn't want to take up space because he just doesn't want to be around. He doesn't want to exist is kind of a feel with his body language. He's dressed in brown top to bottom, and one hand has some of his fingers wrapped together in sort of like a weird glove, but basically it kind of decreases his fingers to 4 instead of 5, and that one giant finger is what he's shoving in for the mandible claw. This is also super interesting is that he has 2 different theme songs. So his first song is Schizophrenic by Jim Johnston, who is the WWE composer. And it's this melancholic, eerie, like sinister, stringed instruments and one bass instrument song. And it's like, I don't know, it's just creepy.
Closer to classical music, opera feeling.
Which I'm assuming isn't what was happening on the other people's theme songs at the time.
Yeah, it's a lot of more guitars for everybody else.
Sure, like long hairband stuff.
Sexy Boy, for example, that's another theme song that was coming out around this time. So,
yeah.
You got Sexy Boy, and then Mankind comes out, and it's just this, and then he's like, and he hobbles out like Igor or something.
And then when he wins, it's this different song. It's called Ode to Freud. It's also composed by Jim Johnston. I've read online that people kind of say that it's a happy song, but for me, it's still like melancholic and eerie. And when I was listening to it, unfortunately, over and over again, it gave me like Hannibal Lecter is listening to music either while he's cooking someone's organs or after he's filled up on human organs. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Not only do I know what you're saying, that's actually true.
Oh shit, that's crazy.
Because Mick Foley said that Hannibal Lecter was a huge inspiration on his music. There's an iconic scene in Silence of the Lambs when he escapes from FBI custody and he kills everybody in the room, and then the only thing that can sort of soothe him is listening to nice classical music. And so Foley really wanted to accentuate that for the Mankind character, and so he thought violence was the only thing that could calm down the Mankind character. So he wanted to have his music, but then sort of the happy, positive music so that the character could celebrate and relax because he finally was able to put himself at ease by hurting somebody.
Fuck.
So, Samee, that was your first experience of that's what the completed character looked like when he made his debut. And what I found was, how did they create this character to begin with? Because as we said, the only thing they knew for sure was Mick Foley was a character named Cactus Jack. And then when he debuts, he comes out as his character named Mankind. And this is exactly how the Mankind character came to be. So to get into the mask itself, the leather iconic Mankind mask, we need to go all the way back to 1995. The Undertaker was in a match with a wrestler named Mabel, where he received a fracture to his orbital bone, which is basically the bone that keeps your eyes in your skull. And so that fractures. And instead of taking time off, the Undertaker decides that he wants to keep going, but he would need some kind of protective covering while he was doing that. So they went to the creative team to try to think of a mask he could wear that would also serve as a way to protect his face. So I'm going to flash a picture up on the screen now. This is the mask they ended up going with. Samee, can you describe it for our audio listeners?
It's basically Phantom of the Opera, but full face, or the MF Doom mask. So it's covered your eyes, cover the nose, and then kind of stretches down. Mouth is exposed, eyes are exposed.
Yeah, and it's ghostly white. It's not quite. It's dead flesh covered. But yeah, this is Phantom Undertaker, and so he was doing this so he could wrestle with a fractured orbital bone, which is absolutely nuts. But they came up with before they landed on the iconic Phantom design, they came up with a few other prototypes, and I'm going to flash this up on the screen. Samee, does this mask look familiar?
Oh yeah, it's straight up like Hannibal Lecter.
Hannibal Lecter, yeah, it's this metal mask, but it's almost the exact shape and design of what would become the Mankind mask. So a year later, when Mick Foley is going to debut, they basically already have this design for a mask ready to go. So when they bring in Mick Foley, they start showing him some like early prototypes. I'm going to flash these up on the screen now as well, of just some early concepts of what they thought the Mankind character could be. As you can see, Samee, he's wearing like a straight jacket, and the mask is made of metal, and it's Hannibal Lecter-esque, and it looked like they were going to shave half of his head. And they asked him, it's like, we know that you're missing half of an ear. Would you mind accentuating that? Would you mind showing that? And he was just like, yeah, it's part of myself, and my fans know that that's a thing about me, so I'm totally fine to show it and to use it. They do that, and then they start to land on sort of the brown leather aspect of it, because when they get into the costume designer and they show them the metal full face mask, the costume designer is basically like, look, practically this just isn't going to work if it's metal. It needs to be leather. And so they start to develop a contoured leather mask that fits Mick Foley's face perfectly. On Mick Foley's podcast, he mentions that I guess at the time they said only the Undertaker can wear black, but he sort of suspects that they were kind of fucking with him and saying that he had to wear brown again, because the whole reason he's getting brought in is to haze him. But when he's like, when I got brought in, they were like, yeah, only the Undertaker can wear black. And then as soon as I debuted and I'm wearing all brown and I'm looking around, and I was like, there are so many other debuting wrestlers wearing black. So it just felt like maybe they were fucking with me when they brought me in. So they dress him in this brown burlap sack looking stuff, and they've got this metal mask that becomes like a leather mask.
I gotta say something. I don't think we've said it yet. Mick Foley is a handsome guy. We've watched all the documentaries. They flash young Mick Foley up. He's handsome. And it's so funny that they're like, oh yeah, he's disfigured, he's gross, he's demented, like poo poo poo. It's like, what the fuck?
Especially in 95 when he's cutting those ECW promos. I'm gonna say it. I think he's hot. And so it's like he's hot and he's dangerous. And then but somebody's seeing that and being like, this guy's a freak. I'm only gonna put him in if I have a mask on him. You're like, what are you talking about? Like, he's a good looking dude.
Yeah, he's a star, man. Ugh, so weird.
Anyways. I agree. So me and Samee very clearly disagree with the creative team, who's just like, yeah, we need to make this guy look like a monster, even though me and Samee, we don't see it. We think you could have brought him in as a hunk. Look, Wrestling Academy, we're not afraid to say it. There are so many different ways to be hot.
It's true.
Mick Foley's one of them.
Mick Foley's a hunk. Make it canon.
you could be a hot guy who's willing to jump off of a ladder onto barbed wire. That can be hot too. That's the look. But let's get into the Mankind character. Foley himself had a lot of input on what would become the Mankind character. And so initially when he got brought in, he was really confused because, again, he didn't know he was getting brought in almost like a joke or a bet or something like that. So he came in and he was basically like, I don't understand why they're not wanting to go with Cactus Jack. It's a very successful character that I've been doing. I know the character very well, and I could do some really cool stuff that would elevate a lot of the talent. So he was super confused, and they really do a full dog and pony show to try to convince him. His biggest thing is he doesn't want to wear a mask because he thinks that one of his best selling points in a match is the facial expressions
It's his
he's allowed to
beautiful
make. And I
face,
think we
yeah.
can both attest, seeing those ECW matches, seeing those WCW matches, the facial expressions he makes is very important. And I think it really is a great aspect of his performance. And so he really felt like if they put a mask on him, it was going to be really limiting to him. The owner is basically like, we don't think it's going to take away. We think it's going to accentuate, you know, and it's going to give you the creative thing of you only have one eye to work with. And that's really going to, what little they can see is so expressive because you're so good that if we put a mask on, it's really going to heighten that. And that's when he starts to be like, okay, what can I do with this? And so Samee, Mick Foley says himself that he was reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and was listening to a lot of Tori Amos. And that is how he was able to start to crack the Mankind character. The idea was he was a piano player who went mad and smashed his own hand with a hammer. That's why he had the bandaged up hand, because his character had lost his mind and smashed his own hand with a hammer. You know, he would rock back and forth. He would pull out his own hair. And apparently he tried it with fake hair that was just lodged in the mask that he pulled out, wanting to not have there be any loophole. He just said it didn't look real. So the only way I could convincingly pull out my hair was to pull out my hair for real. And he did.
Did anyone not tell him that HD TV wasn't going to come out for like decades after he started doing this?
Or just, hey, dude, what if you just don't pull out your hair? But he was just like, no, I think for the character, it really works. So I just got to do it.
Just imagining him returning to his hot wife just with these chunks of hair missing. Like, hey, what's up, darling? Work was tough this week.
She must love him, man. Like, it's just one of those things, just like, that's the kind of love you want, where you could be like, darling, love of my life. For work, I need to pull out my own hair. She'd be like, that's a great idea. I love you.
Bet on yourself. Love you, guy.
That's the look. That's the character. All they are missing is the name. And so they know from his time in WCW on the indies, he was Cactus Jack Manson. And so the WWE was like, maybe we can do something like that. But obviously, we're a lot more family friendly company at the time. This is before the Attitude Era, right? But they're like, we're a little bit more family friendly. So we can do something that's a little bit of an homage to Manson, but not quite.
And change a letter.
we are going to give you the name Mason the Mutilator. Samee, what do you think about Mankind's original name, Mason the Mutilator?
All I'm hearing you say is Marvin the Martian, and I don't love it. Don't love it.
Mick Foley also didn't love the name. He honestly thought it absolutely sucked. And on his podcast, he mentions that he was getting fit for the costume and somebody let slip that the name was going to be Mason the Mutilator. And he was just like, oh, God damn it. And that's when he got pissed. It wasn't that they're not letting him do Cactus Jack. They're making him do this weird costume. He was talking himself into it. But when he gets to Mason the Mutilator, that's when it's a bridge too far. And so he's like, okay, I've got my big meeting with the boss in 2 days and I need to think of something. And he was like, okay, so Mason the Mutilator, that's alliterative. So whatever I pitch him needs to be an alliterative name as well. And so he gets to the meeting and the boss is basically just like, okay, here's your name, Mason the Mutilator. What do you think? And Mick Foley, ever the professional, is like, I love the name, but what if I was called Mankind the Mutilator? He's confused. He's like, okay, I don't really know what that means. It's like, well, it kind of works on two levels, right? So when they're talking about the character, they could talk about the future of mankind or the destruction of mankind, and it kind of works on two levels. And I think honestly that they took it into account. And for me, I was like, I don't know, that seems like kind of a weird story, and I don't totally understand it. And they ask him what about mankind? What sparked mankind in his mind? He's like, dude, I don't know. I think he was honestly just trying to think of anything other than Mason the Mutilator. And so I think he was just like, mankind, I don't know. And so it really felt like a true desperation move. It wasn't really inspired by anything. But when they are bringing him out to debut, they cut the Mutilator from it and he's just Mankind. And that's how he becomes the character with the look in the costume. He does his very first match against Sparkplug Bob Holly.
Gosh.
And beats his ass.
By shoving his hand in his mouth. There's also a thing where the 2 theme song thing wasn't locked in either. And he didn't know until the piano music was playing that they were going to play that music either. So that was like everything felt right after being hired on a dare. So I feel like that's nice.
And I think this also, I mean, just going back to our first part where we were talking about him in WCW and ECW on the indies, right? Even when they started calling him Cactus Jack Manson, this really speaks to the Mick Foley ethos of he was put in a situation that would have tanked so many people's careers, right? Where they took away almost every single part of his aspect. Like they were saddling him with such a weird character. And just through sheer force of will, he was determined to make this a thing that people would appreciate. And I think when he came in, the character is so raw and so disconcerting that it had a charisma to it where it was like, oh, I'm seeing a horror movie monster, but this guy is so into this that I can't look away.
I think it's really just a testament to how good at this and talented Mick Foley is, because I feel like a lot of people would get lost even with just a deranged character, and then you add this mask. Look at Cody Rhodes and Stardust. Like, he got fucked over. Like, it didn't land at all. And, you know, Cody's a great wrestler and great actor. So Mick's really lucky that he's good at this shit, but also we're really lucky, and also WWE is really lucky that he's so good that he made a deranged, demented character a Chef Boyardee sponsor. Like,
yeah, it's so good. Chef Boyardee was like, we need this guy.
Yeah, love him. Let's go. And like, it wasn't the WWE that did it. It was freaking Mick Foley. It's wild, dude. Love him.
They're putting him into a program with the top guy in the company, a position he's very comfortable with. And again, he does not have the ego to be like, yeah, I'm coming in to work with the top guy. Obviously, he's going to win, but he, from his very beginning, was just like, I know how to make myself look good. So even when I lose, I still win because people still like me. They still want to see what I'm doing. And he gets into this program with The Undertaker. It goes really well. And they bring in another big man, Big Van Vader, who we've talked about. And he was having a really tough time adjusting and going with the flow because they didn't quite see Vader the way that he needed to be portrayed to be successful. So as they bring in Vader to make this huge splash and he's just not connecting in the way that they want him to, he was supposed to be in a big feud with Shawn Michaels, and it's just not really clicking. So they get rid of Big Van Vader and they bring in Mankind to feud with Shawn Michaels. So he goes from feuding with one top guy to another top guy, Shawn Michaels, at In Your House Mind Games, September 22nd, 1996. What he's doing is clicking, and I think he's just working really smart, where I think if he had been super cocky or he had a super big ego and hadn't known how to advocate for himself and when to play ball, when to resist, when to put so I think it's like he's really talented, he's really creative, and I think he's really smart. And I think that's how he was able to go from one huge feud into another huge feud. So he's feuding with the biggest guys in the company. This is his first year. This is year one. And he's feuding with the two top guys, The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels.
This is 5 months after his debut in April. This is September. And this match rules, dude.
Dude, this match rules. We're talking September 22nd, 1996, In Your House 10, Mind Games. This, as a note, I think Mick Foley says this is his second favorite match of his entire career. So we're watching a top 10 Mick Foley match, and I got to agree with him on this one. I had never seen this match before. This match rules, dude.
It rules. So it is Shawn Michaels versus Mankind for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Mankind is not alone when he walks down to the ring.
He's being accompanied by, because he's feuding with The Undertaker currently, he has seduced The Undertaker's manager, Paul Bearer. And so now Paul Bearer is representing Mankind. And Samee, you have very limited experience with Paul Bearer, correct?
Yeah.
How did it feel to see him in action? What's sort of your relationship with Paul Bearer?
Before this watching this match, I don't I don't think I've ever heard Paul Bearer speak. So this was just a thrill. Paul Bearer, if you're not familiar, kind of talks like this.
And Samee is not even exaggerating. That is how he talks. So he is in a suit. He's got a weird mustache, and he's very much a super huge weirdo.
He's carrying an urn, which I don't know who's in that urn, but it seems very important to Mankind. And Mankind is also calling Paul Bearer Uncle Paul. Before the match, Mankind and Paul Bearer are getting interviewed, and Mankind sways through this very rattling promo, and he's saying he's bringing misery and destiny to Shawn Michaels, and that he's only alive to make Shawn Michaels miserable, and it's his destiny to hear Shawn Michaels' gurgled screams and to hear Shawn Michaels' liver rupture. What the fuck is this?
I gotta say, dude, early Mankind is so intense and so disconcerting. I was saying before we started rolling that when I started watching Mankind, it was in 1999. So it's 3 years later, and they softened the character considerably. So when I was a kid, Mankind was just this masked goofball. But early Mankind, again, the piano player who smashed his own hand with a hammer, who rocked back and forth, who ripped his own hair out, who needed to be down in the boiler room, and he was friends with rats. This character was so intense. It felt like a stage actor or something where you're just like, oh my God, I'm so freaked out by the depths this guy was going. And I thought Cactus Jack was an unhinged, disconcerting character, and Mankind feels even more disconcerting than that to me.
That was just so fucked up, and it caught me off guard. And Shawn Michaels was also understandably incredibly put off by this promo. So they cut to Shawn before the match, and he cuts this promotion, which is, I think he's so nervous that he stops making sense.
I agree. And it also, to me, it kind of worked in the storyline because it felt like he saw Mankind's promo and it's like, yeah, so Shawn, what do you think? He's like, I'm going to win. I'm the heartbreak. What the fuck was that? Like, that's really what it felt like.
He's literally like, I don't have anything in my head, so I'm lucky, and
we're just wrestling, right? Like this is just wrestling, right? Like what the fuck is this guy's deal?
Mankind was being so scary that I wouldn't be surprised if Shawn didn't know if it was real or not. Like, am I gonna get fucking murdered by this guy? And then to add to this fucking craziness, Mankind enters the arena in a coffin, and he pops up out of it ringside, and he looks so fucking pissed and scary and focused, and it's that damn stringed music that's playing. I do really enjoy the tone shift from and then I think I'm cute.
And then Shawn Michaels' costume is he's just covered in pieces of mirror and glass and stuff like that. So he catches the light and his rhinestone sparkling and then like strutting in. And so you see basically Igor from Frankenstein come to the ring and then I think I'm cute. I know I'm sexy.
And even though he was going through the motions of being the sexy heartbreak kid, you could tell that something was a little off. And I was trying to pinpoint what it felt like what the vibe was, what Shawn's vibe was during this match. And to me, it kind of felt like his entire internal monologue was fuck, 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 fuck.
We've said before, when you go back and sometimes when you watch old matches, they just feel slower paced, and I think this match felt really modern to me. They are just going at a breakneck pace right away and are just really laying it in. And it really reminded me a lot of the Okada Omega New Japan matches that we were talking about. It just had that dialed in intensity where these guys were we're seizing every single opportunity, and it just felt like there was no slack in the match, where they were just able to keep up with each other, predict each other, and then move at this double speed that I was used to seeing. Most wrestling matches seem like they go at a pace, and this was going at double that pace. And then every time a guy would fall, somebody would be there immediately with an elbow drop, but it didn't feel discussed or rehearsed. It just felt like two people with really good chemistry and really good instincts being able to anticipate each other.
Yeah, I even asked you because we haven't really watched a ton of Shawn Michaels stuff yet. And so I asked you, I was like, is he just this fast all of the time? And is he this fast all the time?
What I will say, and this is my personal opinion, I don't think I'm the only person who has this opinion.
Mm,
I think Shawn Michaels may be the greatest to ever do it.
hell yeah.
Can he go that fast? When he wants
Clearly.
to?
Sure.
Can he sell it when he wants to? Can he fly when he wants to? He can do every single aspect of what makes a wrestler a good wrestler. He can do it all at a very high level when he wants to,
Oh my
but he is
gosh.
also has the ego to go with those skills. And
I
so he
see.
was his greatest enemy in that regard, where he's got all the tools, but he also is aware that he has all the tools, and that
And
made
he
him a
becomes
liability in a lot of different ways.
Sure. Okay. Let's go into the breakdown of the match. So, Mankind starts off the match fully beating the pulp out of Shawn until he gets Shawn outside of the ring, which is supposedly where Mankind thrives. Mankind starts ripping the side of the ring cushions up. They're like school gymnasium ones that like fold a little bit. So he's pulling those up, and Shawn sees this and immediately drop kicks him. So Mankind ends up underneath the cushions, and Shawn takes the opportunity to just start jumping in the air and stomping him underneath these cushions. So Michael just talked about how smooth and how intuitive everything felt. And even this crazy, unexpected stuff just felt so smooth, even even though he's just stomping on him underneath Matt, and the cameras caught a little bit of Mankind under there. It kind of felt like when you built blanket forts as a kid that had like no foundation, so you're just kind of under and your forehead was being the ceiling.
It's also just one of those things where I think this is where you can see how good these guys are, because I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of times it's just them noticing the opportunity that they have and then seizing it at just the right time. What it is it's just your watching experience. And these are just two highly experienced guys who just so happen to have really great chemistry with each other. It was great. And so it takes something like throwing him under the mat and jumping on it, right? Sounds pretty
Mm-hmm.
basic, but when that's the right move at the right time, it's genius.
In Your House 10 had the semicolon Mind Games title. And I think that the Mind Games really started between Shawn and Mankind when Mankind gets a mandible claw in early. But it's not only is he shoving his fingers in Shawn's mouth, but he also starts squealing like a pig, which got into my head when I was watching the match. So I couldn't even imagine like how creeped out getting choked out by somebody who's squealing like a pig. And it's the sound. I tried to figure out how to do it. I couldn't do it. But basically, when Mankind is cutting the promos and his voice starts cracking, in that crack moment, that's the sound of the squeal. So it's just this high pitched, just haunting sound. And he's just doing this willy nilly, and it's disgusting.
That's what I meant when I wrote down that early Mankind was just so intense, because I like Cactus Jack. I liked how sadistic and over the top and intense he was. But yeah, there's just something about watching a guy jamming his fist into another guy's mouth and then squealing like a pig. And also, it seems like is half in agony with him and half celebrate. It made my skin crawl. And I'm a fan of Mick Foley. I'm a fan of
Yeah.
Mankind. I'm a fan of when he does super intense shit.
Speaking of intense shit, let's talk about this relationship with Mankind's knee. So Shawn injures Mick's knee, and then it becomes the focus of the match for a while. Mankind starts, I think, getting a little frustrated that that's the weak point. So he calls for, I don't know, is it just like a white rod? And it's like, what are you going to do with that? and he starts stabbing his own knee with the rod. What are we watching here? Mankind, what is happening? Are you trying to make it better? Because I don't think it's going to be better after this.
Meanwhile, Shawn Michaels is just taking every single opportunity he
Oh,
can
yeah.
to just immediately get a kick or a strike or do anything on that knee once it's been exposed as a weakness. But Samee, there was a moment that happened in this match where we see Mankind gets flung over the ropes, and he does a move where he gets his head and neck caught between the top and middle rope, and it's choking him. And as you'll recall, in 1994, that is the exact same move he did. And that's why he lost half of an ear, because he was caught in those ropes, and to survive, he had to pull his head out, cut off his ear. So how did it feel to see that move that has cost him an ear in a match?
I don't know. I didn't expect it to happen. It happened so quickly. The movement itself to get in there is fast, and it feels heavy because his whole body has to go around. And then the imagery of him hanging there is also just so fucking scary. I did not like it at all, and I really thought that he was gonna die again. I guess I know that he didn't lose more of an ear or lose part of his other ear, but I really thought that he was going to.
I wasn't expecting it to happen, so when it happened, it was one of those moments where I found myself just being like, like his ear. It really was super triggering, and probably was a reference that he wanted to have to his character, but it just it got under my skin.
This is disturbing as hell. And even though he was hanging there by his head, he got this is mind games again. He got a mandible claw in. He managed to save one hand to shove into Shawn Michaels' fucking mouth. In the same frustration and anger that Mankind went after his own knee with the right rod, I think that Shawn Michaels was just so frustrated that he got this dirty fucking hand in his mouth again. So he starts biting Mankind's mandible claw hand. It turned into playground rules, and then he starts stomping on it. If you want to disturb yourself and give yourself a wince fest, just watch that section over and over again, because he starts springboarding
Hand
off of the
on the ground,
like this,
grabs the ropes, gets
jumps
so much hang time,
and just stomps. There's one that he gets in where you see his heel like drag after. I don't know if you stumbled upon any facts about this, but there's no way his hand wasn't broken after this. It was way too much.
It looked horrifying. And then Mankind, ever the professional, when it's done, he pops up and sells it immediately to camera. So you just see a super messed up hand just being like,
my piano hand.
He'll never play piano again, Samee.
Yeah, just because of that and not other weird stuff.
Not weird shit that he already did.
So Mankind retaliates by making Shawn Michaels smash his nuts on the turnbuckles. And then we get a classic Mick Foley moment where Mankind gets on the apron and he falls backwards. He takes Shawn with him and they go through a table. And it seems like that could be the end of this match. Nah, but it's not. Mankind grabs a chair and he starts climbing the ropes. And then the Heartbreak Kid jumps off of another chair for leverage to jump up and sweet chin music the chair into Mankind's head. But that's not the end yet. So Shawn goes in for a cover. He's interrupted by Big Van Vader, and the bell starts ringing like, this is the end of the match. You guys fucked up. This is way too much.
This is outside interference. This is cheating.
Yeah, but they continue going. So Shawn Michaels goes to the edge of the ring, taunting Big Van Vader, and then Paul Bearer comes in and smashes Shawn over the head with the urn. And then Big Van Vader tries to get back in, but then Psycho Sid comes out of nowhere and just tackles Van Vader and runs him out of the arena. During all of this, Mankind was not moving. And then we see the broken piano hand kind of start popping up like it has a life of its own. Kind of like Devon Sawa's Idle Hands. Ever heard of it?
Great pull.
Thank you so much. So the idle hand goes straight into Shawn's mouth, and Mankind tries to put Shawn into the casket, but The Undertaker was in there. So The Undertaker runs Paul and Mankind out of the arena. And because the whole match just ended in chaos, Shawn Michaels is still the WWE World Heavyweight Champion.
Boom, dude. Yeah, this match was so much fun.
This is crazy, dude.
It's always great when, I don't know why this was a hidden gem. I think it was just a little bit before when I started watching. So I never thought to look for a great match in 1996. But lo and behold, here one was.
I think we may have talked about this before, but Mick has talked about how he approaches matches with the thought of like, how can we elevate each other? Even though I'm losing, I'm going to look good. You're going to win, so you're going to look good, but we're going to unlock something else for you. So this match is no difference at all. Shawn showcased that he can be an outside of the ring baddie, and Mick proved that he's a sick fucking bastard. And that's it.
It also just goes, I think, back into when we followed the earlier parts of his career. This is exactly what he did for Sting. It was the same exact situation. We wanted to bring him in to make Sting look good, to freshen him up, and then he was able to get such a great performance out of him. And Mick Foley was able to look good. Sting was able to look good. It was all good. And so I think his ability to do that, people start to see that this guy is an asset to the WWF. And so he slowly starts becoming more and more and more popular. And then June 28th, 1998, a pretty infamous match happens at the King of the Ring. It was the second ever Hell in a Cell, which we have absolutely gone into so much more detail in our Hell in a Cell episodes. If you want to hear us talk about that, we cover it in great detail there. But all you need to know is Mick Foley gets thrown off the top of a Hell in a Cell ring. He falls 20 feet from the top of a steel cage through a table. One of his teeth goes through his nose. Then he climbs the cage and then gets thrown through the top of the cell into the ring again. It is one of the greatest wrestling moments of all time. It's one of the most infamous. It's one of the most replayed things. It's one of the best visuals. And that happens for the WWF. So it just, the owner of the company, you know, the person who hired him, almost as a dare, goes out of his way to be like, what you did here was so above and beyond what anybody thought was going to happen here, and just like really thanked him. And I think that's when it really starts to click that this guy's an asset. Everything he touches is, you know, he puts so much of himself that he's able to make everything look good. He's able to create these huge moments where even if he loses, he still kind of wins because he's so good. 6 months after that infamous Hell in a Cell match where he gets thrown off the top of the cage, falls 20 feet to the floor, one of his teeth goes through his nose. 6 months later, the Mankind character is being brought into Survivor Series, November 15th, 1998, Survivor Series : Deadly Game. And so traditionally the Survivor Series is a 5 versus 5 tag team match, but this year they were doing something a little bit different. They had to vacate the WWF title, and so for the entire Survivor Series they were just hosting a tournament that was going to take place over the course of one pay-per-view. And whoever won the tournament was going to become the WWF champion. The story walking into this was Mankind was being seduced by an evil faction called the Corporation, which you remember from our very first episode. So it's this villainous corporate greed kind of stable where they're taking Mankind under their wing and they're like, we see big things for you. And if you start rolling with us, we think you could be the next WWF champion. And so Mankind is being seduced by this. And that's when he really starts to change his look. So he starts wearing, instead of his brown kind of burlap sack costume, he starts wearing a more respectable shirt and tie, which I got to just say is a great look. So he's wearing a shirt and tie. And then another thing they do to start seducing Mankind over towards the Corporation is they create a brand new title belt called the Hardcore Championship, and they award it to Mankind. So Samee, I'm going to show you a picture here. Can you explain what the Hardcore Championship looks like?
So the Hardcore Championship kind of looks like somebody smashed their WWF World Championship title and then taped some duct tape on it and then wrote on several pieces of duct tape, WWF Hardcore Champion.
Exactly. And the Hardcore Championship was an interesting belt because It could be defended 24/7. All you needed to do was bring a referee anywhere in the world where the hardcore champion was, and then you could immediately start fighting him. Obviously hardcore, so weapons were cool, outside interference was cool. This was built specifically for Mankind, and it was a way to try to seduce Mankind over to the corporation's way of thinking, and it started to work on him. The corporation is basically like, you don't have to worry about a thing in this tournament, and they do everything possible to put their thumb on the scale so that Mankind advances. They throw him really easy opponents. When he's got tougher opponents, they come in, they do outside interference. When he fights Stone Cold, they bring in their own referee, Shane McMahon, to come in and just screw Stone Cold over in the last possible second. And he gets all the way to the finals where Mankind faces The Rock for the WWF Championship. And so we get to the finals of the Deadly Game tournament. It is Mankind versus The Rock. And they're having this super intense match, and the corporation is surrounding the ring. They're all over, and you're just like, okay, well, it seems like this is sort of a done deal, and Mankind is going to walk away with this championship. Over the course of the match, The Rock gets Mankind in the sharpshooter, and then in a very direct callback to an infamous thing that happened in 1997, they 100% wholesale recreate the Montreal screw job where they have The Rock screw over Mankind, where they were like, oh, he's tapping out, even though Mick Foley Mankind didn't tap out at all. And so then they award the championship title to The Rock, and everybody's like super confused, and all the corporation comes in, they're all like raising his hand, and it basically is revealed in this promo that this whole thing, this whole seduction of Mankind, was all just a big fucking joke. Like, they were doing it just to fuck with the Mankind character because they only ever liked The Rock.
You know what? I'll admit it right now. I am near tears thinking about how bummed Mankind was when they revealed that it was just a fucking joke. That sucks.
Here's the thing that I think is happening. So the first time She's All Thatted, it was for real. They really did it to him.
Yeah.
But this time, they're very clearly making it part of the storyline, right? And I think this is where they get to have him rise above those criticisms that the owner of the company had for him. Because when he's being She's All Thatted in storyline, they're saying all that stuff. They're like, look at you, you're like a deformed freak, like blah, 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 blah. And then you get to just see him being like, well, Mr. McMahon, I disagree. And you get to have the crowd be like, yeah, no, we like Mankind. We don't like you. Like, what you're saying sucks. We like him. And so it really is when the Mankind character started to shift, and he toned down considerably from that super intense guy to more of an eccentric goofball. The shirt and the tie stuck around, which I gotta say, just fashion wise, it's a great call. That stuck around. The eccentric stuff, so like the specific insidious tension is gone, and now he's just a guy who gives it all for the fans. He will endure so much punishment because he loves this and he's got the will to win, but it also gets him into a feud with The Rock.
Oh my.
So November, The Rock wins the title. And so they're going back and forth. And then this all kind of culminates January 4th, 1999, on an episode of Monday Night Raw. This tension between WWF champion The Rock and then Mankind, who was screwed over and he has a legitimate claim to the title. It all comes to a head in this episode.
This is a classic, chaotic 1999 WWE match. Spoiler alert. It only takes 9 minutes, basically.
It feels they cover so much ground in 9 minutes. Hearing that that's the runtime, not in a bad way. It was just like they do so much in that 9 minutes. It felt like a 20-minute match. This is a madcap farce match.
They did a lot. So even before the match starts, there's an in-ring promo earlier in the episode. Mankind asked for a chance at The Rock's title at the Royal Rumble because I think he feels like he deserves a shot at it because they fucked him over already. And they grant this match, but he has to wrestle Triple H in a match refereed by Shane McMahon. Obviously, during that match between Mankind and Triple H, Shane pulls some bullshit over Mankind, but because Triple H, DX, and Mankind were buddies at the time, Triple H pedigrees Shane, and he goes, he's all yours. And so Mankind grabs Shane in a very mean-looking shoulder submission.
This is where we get some shades of the old Mankind, because he's got him in this. He's basically got his shoulder on the ground, and he's twisting him in such a way where he's just like, he gets a microphone. He's like, so here's how this is going to work. I need to talk to the boss right now.
Yeah.
Boss comes out, furious. He's got his son on the ground and he's got him in this arm position. He's like, so he starts twisting and he puts the microphone in Shane's face. Shane is screaming. And he's like, so here's how this is going to work. I actually changed my mind. I don't want to match the Royal Rumble. I want a title match tonight, or I'm going to break your son's fucking arm. And then, so he basically holds the owner of the company hostage and is like, I will kill your son if you don't give me a title shot. And Shane is just like, he's freaking out. And so they begrudgingly agree to give him a no disqualification title match tonight. And then we walk into the match and that's what's going on. So it becomes a West Side Story-esque Rumble where The Rock comes in flanked by the corporation. You know, he's got his gang. And then Mankind comes to the ring and he's got DX flanking him. And so it's just like, all the ingredients are swirling. Everybody's surrounding the ring. And it's like, who's going to make the first move here? Is it going to be the corporation? Is it going to be DX? And then they just have this nuts match.
It's a brawl for sure. It doesn't take too long for them to roll out of the ring. The Rock ends up dropping a set of steel steps onto Mankind and then drops a second set of steps onto those steps. And I always get worried because those steps have like a clear line, like border, like a cookie cutter, basically. And so whenever they pick up those steps, I get so nervous that a cookie cutter edge of those steps is going to slice into a wrestler. And the second set of steps that The Rock drops onto Mankind is at a very dangerous angle, and You
thought they were going to make cookies out of him.
I really am so glad that we didn't watch a beheading. What's charming about this feud between The Rock and Mankind is that throughout all of their matches, both of them somehow end up on a headset or a microphone or anything, because they're both promo beasts, and they were just no holds barred, just cutting promos whenever they could on each other.
So it's truly, he is beating Mankind. So The Rock is beating Mankind's ass. He walks over to the commentary, tells one of the commentators to take off his headset, then he puts on the headset and is basically just like, can you believe this piece of trash? And you're like, motherfucker, you're wrestling right now. What are you doing? You're at work, bro. Don't talk to me.
So The Rock throws the ring bell at Mankind's head, and unfortunately I really love the sound because it's the pure ring bell sound of ding. It's just very comical but so rude. It's so rude. Mankind pulls Mr. Socko out of his pants, and Mr. Socko is a sock puppet that Mankind just started wearing.
It was part of when they were making his character softer and goofier, that was like one of the things he did as a joke, is he brought out a sock puppet, and it became so popular that the putting the sock puppet on his hand became the signal that he was about to do the mandible claw.
Right, and I feel like he got rid of that broken piano hand like glove, right? It was right. Okay.
So I think they moved away from an eccentric piano player to just a goofy dude. An eccentric dude
with a sock puppet in his pants until it's time to put it in someone's mouth.
Yeah.
Great. So Mankind pulls Mr. Socko out of his pants and gets the mandible claw going, and then all hell breaks loose. Ken Shamrock comes in with the chair. Billy Gunn tackles him out of the ring, and the rest of DX and the corporation start brawling outside of the ring, and then we hear a heavenly choir of glass shattering, and our hero in jeans and a long sleeve t-shirt lumbers in. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. He slides into the ring. He hits The Rock with a huge chair shot. He pulls Mankind's body over The Rock, and guess what, Michael?
What?
Mrs. Foley's baby boy is now a WWE heavyweight champion of the world.
And DX, they lift him up on their shoulders and they're just carrying him, and he's holding the belt. And it is just a truly Beautiful moment.
It was really emotional. Like, obviously, I got goosebumps. Obviously, I cried. I'm so glad that Mankind took a moment to be like, hey, kids, look what I did. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so glad that happened.
Oh, that's true. He gets on the microphone to be like, hey, at the risk of seeming uncool, I just want to say to my two little people at home, Daddy did it. And you're just like, he thanks his family. He's the best.
I know. It's so nice. I'm so glad that they planned to have his buddies out in the ring so that there was, a proper amount of fanfare. I really appreciated it.
The crowd was going crazy. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's so wild to see The Rock at his peak versus the Mankind, like as Mankind is ascending, and to see them both hyper popular people wrestle, and it's still Mankind. Mankind has the upper hand.
But here's what I will also say, and this goes back to our Wrestling Academy thesis. They're both hotties. They're just two different hotties.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. You try to put a mask on him, but the hottie remains. He's still hot.
Hottie bursts through. Look, if you're hot, all of your dreams will come true.
You just got to work for him sometimes. So, Samee, this match is beautiful. This match is great, but it is actually pretty infamous. As we mentioned before, during the late 90s, the company WWF was in a bitter rivalry with their rival promotion WCW, which from our last episode, you remember, Mick Foley worked for them. He worked for WCW before going to ECW and then ending up in the WWF. But they were in a real life, the two companies were in a real life ratings war with one another. And so they were constantly trying to sabotage each other so they could be the one to win the ratings war and capture the wrestling fan base. So something that would happen was WWF's shows were pre-taped and WCW's shows were live. So something WCW would do to try to sabotage the WWF is they would read out the results of the WWF show live on air. So that's sort of like,
rude,
so this is what's about to happen here. And this match is no exception. So on the January 4th, 1999 episode of Monday Night Nitro, they are basically like, oh, and I guess if you hop over to the WWF, you'll see Mankind win the WWF championship. Yeah, that'll really put some butts in seats. And apparently something like 600,000 people immediately changed the channel from WCW to WWF to be like, wait, Mankind's going to win the title? Oh, fuck. And then they immediately went and watched it. And everybody who stayed watching WCW was witness to one of the worst moments WCW had ever produced. It's a match that has a moment in it called it's the infamous finger poke of doom, when Kevin Nash and Hulk Hogan were going to be wrestling for the WCW title, and then Hulk Hogan just taps Kevin Nash in the chest. He takes a dive and lets Hulk Hogan pin him for the championship, and then everybody hops up and hugs Hulk Hogan and they celebrate. I think a lot of people point to that specific moment of like, that is when the WWF won the Monday Night War. It was this right here. They took a shot at the WWF, and that shot sent 600,000 people to watch the competition, to watch Mankind because they love him. And then everybody who stayed watched this like really creatively bankrupt moment that just like did not work and fell super duper flat. So Mick Foley wins the title, and then he hears through the grapevine that his old company, the company that he lost his fucking ear at, they're just like publicly trashing him. And I guess it's just like, Samee, what do you like? That's so shitty, but like, what do you think about all this?
WCW was a sinking ship at the time. They spoiled WWF in hopes that those 600,000 people who left stayed to watch this. To quote legendary icon Jojo Siwa, karma's a bitch. They should have known better.
They should have known better. Absolutely. But they didn't. And that's a lot of people look to this specific moment of Mankind winning the WWF title as this is the moment that WWF won the Monday Night War. Thought that was pretty interesting. But all that stuff, that's another storyline. This specific storyline, right? So Mankind just took the title off of The Rock. The Rock is pissed. So the whole episode of Raw revolved around Mankind being like, hey, I really want that title. Is there any way I could have a title shot at the Royal Rumble? And the corporation being like, mean girls, and laughing in his face and being like, no, dude, you can't. And so the very next week, The Rock is like, I demand to have a title shot at the Royal Rumble. And then he gets to watch Mankind be like, nah, dude, sorry. And so The Rock is just throwing out different stipulation after stipulation. It's like, okay, what if it's like a no DQ match? And Mankind's
No,
like, nah,
thank
sorry,
you.
dude, no thanks. And then he's like, okay, what if the corporation's banned from ringside? He's like, nah, I don't care, man. I just don't think you have the star power to challenge for this title. He's like really throwing all the awful shit they said back in his face. And so it gets to the point where The Rock is basically like, okay, well, I don't know what you want. I quit. And then as soon as he says I quit, Mankind's like, yeah, I agree. I agree to that match. And then The Rock's immediately like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, I challenge you to an I quit match at the Royal Rumble. And so, Samee, what is an I quit match?
An I quit match. The stipulation is it ends when somebody says I quit. This is something that was an unexpected perk of having these two wrestlers in an I quit match, is that I don't know if this is the regular thing to do, but they would hold the microphone in front of their opponent to say I quit. But because both of these idiots love the mic throughout the entire match, we get some of the stupidest shit. So Mankind does something huge to The Rock. He puts the mic in The Rock's mouth. The Rock goes, The Rock is gonna kick your fat ass. And then Mankind's like, go to hell, The Rock. And then as the match continues,
it would basically be like, The Rock, it like puts Mankind through a table, then he puts the microphone in his face, like, do you quit, Mankind? And then he puts the mic in his face,
The Rock.
And then you can see him be like, go to hell. And it just, so they just both get to really do an incredible match, but then also seriously ham it up on the microphone. And so it does feel like some kind of weird theater of them marching all over the arena. They're going everywhere and just being like, what say you, Mankind? And then Mankind is like, I say never in 1,000. And it's just like, obviously it's not that cheesy, but that's
sure.
It just had this weird Shakespearean vibe to it because they kept being able to cut little soliloquies on each other, which I thought was really funny and kind of cute. But here's the thing. I say cute. This match is not fucking cute, dude.
It is not cute.
Nuts.
It is not cute. After a while, like when they start shoving the microphone into each other's faces, all they're doing is gasping for air because they beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah, so they are doing. So again, I'm making it sound really cheesy. It's like the soliloquy part of it is very goofy and very silly, but they're doing the most heinous shit to each other. So it starts with that, like, I say go to hell, Rock. But yeah, you're right. 20 minutes in, he sticks the microphone in Mankind's face and he's just like, you're gonna have to kill me, I guess. Because they're getting so hurt. It hurts so bad.
It's so bad. Just a few moments that I really loved is that The Rock used the bell again for some sound warfare. And then after he rings the bell behind Mankind's head, he just starts singing, bells will be ringing. It's like The Rock, like, he's just so ridiculous.
Yeah,
and
he's such a ham. He is chewing the scenery, as it were.
Mankind gets a mandible claw in, obviously, and then right after, The Rock, I don't know what, it seemed like he really loved doing this, but he was spitting water, like he drinks a water bottle and then spits it right onto somebody, and then Michael Cole, right after, Mankind shoved the dirty Mr. Sacco into The Rock's mouth, enough for him to kind of pass out a little bit. The Rock spits water on Mankind, and then we hear Michael Cole be like, despicable. It's like, really, dude? Like,
it's like, bitch, did you see what they've been doing? Like,
are you paying attention?
It's like, I would rather somebody spit water on me than do any of the shit they do to each other. And that's it. Like, I would 1,000 times out of 1,000. Are you kidding me?
100%. And then The Rock pulls a ladder out of nowhere. He starts climbing up and he's in the audience now, and Mankind follows him. And then we get the Mankind spot where he falls onto some sound equipment that makes all of the lights in the arena turn off.
Yeah, so he hits this board. He hits this board with a bunch of cables and boards on it, and then it, sparks, and they're like, they hit the generator. The power's gone out in the building. And so luckily they have a follow spotlight on backup power, and they're able to
Very
just follow
luckily.
the guys around.
Very luckily.
They've lost all
Ridiculous.
power to the building except for the cameras and the commentator equipment and a follow spot.
Yeah,
Thank
crazy
God
how
they
that
didn't
works.
hit. Yeah, I'm so thankful that they didn't hit that circuit, you know?
Eventually, The Rock handcuffs Mankind, and it's just sucks to see The Rock just beat the hell out of Mankind, and he can't do anything about it. But he does start biting The Rock, and then he does knee drop The Rock's penis and balls. And then we get to a very, very infamous part of the match where Mankind is still handcuffed and The Rock has a chair. He starts laying into the head of Mankind so many times that after 6, I had hash marks. At 6, Jerry the King Lawler, who has been behind The Rock the entire time, anything brutal that happened, anything that was like mega violent, he was like, "Yes, The Rock, you rule." After 6 of these huge chair shots, Jerry's like, "Okay, you have to stop now." And then there is a little bit of the curtain of the Jerry the King Lawler character fell down a little bit because I heard for real concern, and The Rock ends up hitting Mankind directly on the head 11 times.
Full force. Mankind has his hands handcuffed behind his back, so he is not being able to protect himself in any way. He is just straight up taking chair shots to the head. Hearing Mick Foley talk about the behind the scenes on this really illustrated just like this situation is like kind of even more fucked up than I initially realized. They had originally agreed on 5 chair shots. And when his hands were handcuffed behind his back, he didn't realize how bad it was going to hurt. I think he said that it felt like a bolt of lightning traveled all the way down his body. And so it hurt him so bad. He was like, I wasn't able to sell what was happening. And so I kept kind of jumping back up. And because I kept jumping back up, it prompted The Rock to be like, okay, well, I guess I didn't hit hard enough. So then he would hit him again. And so what you were witnessing was a miscommunication, but I also counted. I know they agreed on 5. So they did the 5, and then The Rock does 6 more. So I do think Mankind is being a little bit professional here and being like, it was kind of a miscommunication, as opposed to being like, yeah, I think The Rock kind of got carried away and was like fucking milking it. And I think it was probably a mix of all 3 of those ingredients of like a miscommunication, somebody was milking it, and then the ownership that Mick Foley took in the situation too. But here's what's even more fucked up. So the original finish of the match was going to be they're doing these chair shots, and then Mick Foley, Mankind, looks out into the audience and he sees that his wife and children are watching the match. And then that's what gets him to quit. And so his family is in the audience for this. It's like a whole thing. They meet The Rock and they're like, hey, you know, this is Dad's job. And so Dad's going to act like he's really hurt. And then they meet The Rock, and The Rock's like, I'm going to be working with your dad tonight. And like, it's like a whole thing. It's like they're really trying to protect these kids, and they know they're working. But before they go out, they're like, hey, so the network thinks that it's like actually really fucked up if we show kids. So we're going to change the ending of the match. And we'll get into what that is in a second. So they changed the ending of the match, but his family is just there watching it. And if you ever watch the wrestling documentary Beyond the Mat, they have cameras on his family while you're seeing every single one of those chair shots, all 11 of them. And then his kids, they're screaming, they're crying. It's like that's their dad, and he's being tortured in front of everybody. And then what I think is really fucked up is they show Mick the footage of that. And they're like, what do you think about that? And then you get to watch him, right? Like he is an extreme wrestler, and he pushes the boundaries, but he's not actually a maniac. And so he's just like, this is horrifying. Like I don't want to ever subject my children to this. Like this, like, yeah, I absolutely agree that this like crossed the line. But it was also like, I don't know why you're blaming this guy. Like, he got hit in the head 11 times. I get what they're saying, and I understand that it's like they're making a point about like this is a really hard, violent way to make a living. But So again, like this match it's horrifying. It's brutal. This spot specifically because again, you're watching, and this is before we knew as much about head trauma as we know now. So you're watching a guy get getting 11 unprotected chair shots to the head. It's fucked up.
My relationship with this match actually was from just clips from Beyond the Mat. So I knew coming in that this was going to be the thing, and then I watched the thing, and it really was not. It's not great. It's really not great.
So as we said, they changed the ending of the match. So I do feel like they ended this match in a very goofy way. So we just watched a guy get pasted 11 times in the head for real. And then he's obviously knocked out. And then you see The Rock go, "Mankind, do you quit?" And he puts the mic up to his mouth. And then you just hear the most pre-recorded
I quit. I quit. I quit.
Yeah.
I quit.
It really felt like somebody had AI do it. And what had happened was they had tricked Mankind into saying "I quit" on an earlier program called Sunday Night Heat, which was the lead up to the event. And so he said it there, they clipped it, and then they just played that clip again.
This match was interesting to me because thus far we've been watching Cactus Jack and Mankind matches where his opponents visibly have to dig deep and meet Mankind, meet Cactus Jack where he is, which is outside of the ring, on top of stuff, getting ready to jump off of it, right? But what's interesting to me is that all of this ultraviolent stuff that The Rock was doing, it didn't seem outside of his grasp at all, even though I think he wasn't doing any of this stuff before, right?
Sort of the behind the scenes of what was going on was The Rock, over the top charismatic. Even when he was a bad guy, he was just, we've done a whole episode on The Rock. He was just a very funny bully jerk who was very quick and a very fun, good wrestler. And so they really wanted to make his character hateable. And so they were looking for different avenues to try to make him more of an out and out villain. And so like, okay, what if he's got a super vicious streak and he's attacking like kind of a beloved underdog? That might be a way to turn the audience against him. So it's not that I don't think nobody thought The Rock was capable of it. I think it was just, seeing him remorselessly hit a guy 11 times in the head with a chair with his hands handcuffed behind his back should make you as a human being be like, well, I hate this guy. And then that's
right.
That's what they were going for. So they were just looking for ways to try to make The Rock a villain. And so because he was so charismatic, they kind of went outside the box. I disagree. I don't think it was necessary, but I wasn't a writer at the WWE in 1999, so I couldn't have done anything.
Showbiz.
So The Rock wins the title. And the next night on Raw, the owner of the company is so happy that The Rock was able to regain the title at the Royal Rumble that he's decided he's going to give him a $100,000 bonus.
Oh, God.
They bring an armored truck. It's a whole thing. And then while they're getting the money out of an armored truck, Mankind shows up, and then just Mr. Sacco takes out both the guards and steals the money bag out from the back of the armored truck.
I love it.
And so his head is bandaged. It's like his head is for real messed up.
Yeah.
And so his head is super bandaged up. So then he comes out to the ring and is just throwing money out of the bag and is basically like, if you want this $100,000 back, then give me a fucking rematch. And then you can see The Rock being like, yeah, okay, give me the money, like, you motherfucker, or whatever. So then he challenges him to a special match at the Super Bowl halftime show called Halftime Heat. And so basically what was happening for real was the WWF wanted to do counter programming to the Super Bowl, which is crazy. And so they concocted this wild match that was going to take place on the Super Bowl. It was going to be a false count anywhere match in an empty arena, meaning they could go anywhere. But because it was an empty arena, that means they could pre-film it. They shot the match, they pre-taped the match 2 days after the Royal Rumble. So 2 days after he takes 11 chair shots to the head, they have this match. And then they air it, 3 weeks later. So it seems like he's had time to heal. He has not had time to heal.
No.
But the network was like, what we saw was so intense, you cannot have any blood in this match. And so they basically go and they're like, cool, you got to have this match in Mankind. cool with the blood. And he's like, dude, I've got stitches in my head. I don't know. I don't know if I can control whether I bleed or not at this point.
Oh my
And so
God, they're so
they
mean to Mankind.
they bandage the fuck out of his head, and then he just has to do this whole match. And so Samee,
Yeah.
at the Super Bowl halftime show, January 31st, 1999, while the rest of the world is watching, Gloria Estefan, Stevie Wonder, and Big Bad Voodoo Daddy do the Super Bowl halftime show.
Yeah.
Instead, we were watching halftime heat in an empty arena. How did this match find you?
I feel like this match was a really big gamble for the creative team. Before I really got in the match, it was shocking that their idea for, the Super Bowl crowd is going to tune into us with basically a COVID era empty arena, one commentator, two wrestlers, and a bunch of camera people. And that's it. But then as they unfolded and Clue game boarded their way through an arena, I understood. And a lot of it happened in the kitchen, which felt like super wish fulfillment for kids in the late 90s and maybe people who work in kitchens as well. So the destruction was really fun.
They really were exploring the space, and it just set them up for a lot of goofy, over-the-top visuals of getting thrown into a bunch of cotton candy, having hot dog buns thrown in your face, just doing all kinds of stuff. At one point, The Rock throws Mr. Sacco into an oven, and because this was pre-recorded, they got to put some sound effects. So you heard
loved those.
Mr. Sacco get thrown into an ice-cold oven, but you still hear... You're like,
even
Mr. Sacco's getting burned. Yeah. And then he touches it and he's like, yeah. It's very funny. And it really reminded me of those older ECW matches that we were watching where it's just not really storytelling, not really technique. It's just how much crazy shit can we do in 15 minutes. And Samee, I don't know about you, but I feel like they covered a lot of ground. In this match, I saw Mankind get thrown down an entire flight of stadium stairs, much longer than normal stairs.
Shane on commentary of a replay of that moment where Mankind falls down the stairs, his fucking coked up ass goes as Mankind is falling down the stairs. Also, anytime they cut to Shane during this, because the match was pre-filmed.
In the storyline of the WWF, they're like, we're here at an arena full of people where a wrestling show is going on, but we rented out a whole separate arena that's live right now that Mankind and The Rock are just fighting at. And so they made it seem like they were simulcasting between the empty arena and the live place. And so I think they would just bring it in to pop in that live energy. But yeah, Samee's right. Shane McMahon seemed like he was on coke.
This dumbass had time to figure out what he was going to say. And he said, it's like, bro, chill. This was a really fun match to watch once they got started. So Mankind falls down the stairs, then they go into the kitchen, they're all over the place, as you said, they're touching ovens, they're sizzling, there's Foley, there's Mick Foley. What was really super funny to me was that as The Rock was throwing Mankind all over, especially the buffet tables where the crew was eating and stuff, he was tasting food and commenting on it. So there's these giant bags of popcorn, and he rips open the popcorn, he throws a handful in his mouth, and he's like, popcorn's too salty. And then he gets this bowl of sauce.
My favorite one that he does with that is he picks up a bowl of salsa and he throws it in Mankind's face. And then Mankind's like, my eye. And then you see The Rock taste it. And he goes, it's mild. And so it's like, what are you freaking out? This isn't even hot. And it's just like, you asshole. And so I think that's the main thing to keep in mind is while all of this craziness is happening, this goofball over the top stuff is happening, The Rock is just kind of dictating and is just roasting him he will not stop talking the entire time and is just roasting the fuck out of everybody for 15 straight minutes. It's so you're watching all these crazy stunts and then you're just hearing what The Rock thinks about all of it.
At one point, he throws Mick Foley into some offices and he stops to talk to a woman working there. And he's like, hey, what's up? And then she answers not in a way that he wants. And he's like, well, you're just a piece of trash anyway. It's like, dude, what the fuck? The way that The Rock improvises is not, UCB quality. But it is really funny that there was a phone ringing in the offices. He picks up and he's like, oh, this is the this is the Smackdown Hotel on Rudy Pool Boulevard. This is like, and then he pretends that somebody's asking for Mankind. It's like, oh, Mankind's not here right now. He's got a mouthful of my foot in his face. Like, it's just like, dude.
Yeah, I know. It's probably somebody calling in to be like, hey, I can't get into the building. What's going on? And then instead he's just like, oh, you want to talk to Mankind? It's like, I don't know who the fuck either of you are. Like, I work here.
So they eventually land in the loading dock, and then Mankind starts babbling, you're gonna love this, you're gonna love this, and he points his good eye towards a forklift. And of course we're gonna love this. So Mankind goes, excuse me, can you get out of here? To the person operating the forklift.
Yeah, like, there's just a
sure.
full-on village person looking construction worker in there, and he's like, excuse me, sir, can you please move? And the guy's like, yeah, oh, absolutely. And then he gets in the forklift, and you're like, oh, here we fucking go, bro.
And guess what? Mankind pins The Rock with a fork lift. That's it. He gets the win, and then that's the end of this fucking crazy cartoon Looney Tunes match. Fuck.
As just a fan of Jackass and CKY and all that kind of stuff, where it just really felt like people fucking around with a camcorder, this really felt like that. It wasn't what kind of cool wrestling match can we do? It was just how much crazy shit can we do in an empty arena. And so on that level, I think you were right. It just truly felt like wish fulfillment for 11-year-old Michael watching this, being like, wow, they're really just going all over the place. And I think the legacy of matches like this, I mean, still to this day, AEW does Stadium Stampede, which is almost the exact same concept as this,
Jesus.
except it's 12 people fighting in an empty arena as opposed to just 2.
That's nuts. And I do want to mention that our first episode, we highlighted a match in April. Could you imagine if you tuned in just a little bit before?
Young Michael at a Super Bowl party, and they're like, wait. We gotta hop over to halftime heat. Hey guys, I'm gonna turn off Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Is that okay with everybody? They have the big match, Super Bowl halftime show. Mm-hmm. Mankind wins the title back. So then they head February 14th, 1999 to an event called the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It is going to be a last man standing match between Mankind and The Rock for the WWF World Championship. Samee.
Yeah.
These guys have done everything imaginable, everything under the sun to each other. They've hurt each other so bad. This feud has been so brutal. And now here they are in a last man standing match, meaning to win, you have to beat your opponent so bad they cannot answer a 10 count. They cannot stand up.
These guys are tired. This match is 22 minutes long. They have beat the shit out of each other in so many different ways. But how are they going to top and finally defeat the other man who gets up every single time?
I think I was walking in with the same thing of just like, you guys, what more can we do? Like you've pulled such intense and specific violence on and against one another that I was watching. I was like, I don't know if this can be topped. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it does. And I'm a little bit grateful for that. Like, I was just like, I don't think you could go any further than 11 unprotected chair shots to the head. I mean, don't get me wrong. This match is intense. It's nuts. They do all kinds of crazy shit to each other. But it was like, I quit matches up here. We're kind of down here.
Yeah.
Couldn't be happier.
So before this match starts, The Rock finds Mankind and starts beating his legs in with a chair. And throughout the entire 22-minute match, Michael Cole reminds us that Mankind's knee was dislocated earlier in the day. It's not long before the guys start brutalizing each other all over the arena. They don't hang out in the ring much, these two lovers. Mankind hits a nasty DDT on a tech table, and I'm just highlighting this because the sound was so crunchy and it was good. It was really good DDT. So Mankind has the upper hand for a longer time than I expected him to, because at this point he's just permanently concussed, I'm assuming. And he gets a little too big for his britches, and he tries to do the corporate elbow, and unfortunately He misses. The Rock gets on the headset and starts talking shit, and to shut him up, Mankind shoves his hand into his mouth. We get a vintage Mankind Mick Foley moment, and he does an elbow drop off of the ring onto the Rock's body that was kind of dangling over the commentary desk. Mankind throws those steel chairs into the ring, but his plan is foiled. The Rock grabs a chair and starts hammering Mankind's knee. He goes in for more, but the chair bounces off and hits him in the head.
Dude, this was such a cartoon thing. That it was so great because we've seen him just. I was so worried he was gonna paste him in the head again, and so then you see The Rock just full force swing a chair. Mankind ducks. It hits the ropes, and then as though it was a cartoon, was just like.
Boing. It was good. I am kind of glad every time The Rock gets hit with a chair after the I Quit match.
Part of me was a little bit like, if I was The Rock, maybe I would insist, being like, hey, it bounces off, it hits me in the face. We good? We cool?
Later, The Rock grabs the steel chairs that Mankind threw into the ring, and he drops them onto Mankind, who is lifeless on the outside of the ring. Michael Cole in this moment says that the steps weigh 250 pounds, which I don't know if I believe, but I think I believe now that I'm thinking about it, because steel's not light.
It's not light, but it's not 250 pounds heavy.
Okay, well, they're throwing giant cookie cutters that may or may not be over 200 pounds at each other. So yes, I did scream when these steps fell onto Mankind's goddamn body. The Rock somehow shows up with a microphone again, and he starts singing SmackDown Hotel.
Dude, this scene is so great. So he gets on the mic and he's just like, since my baby left me. He's like singing the blues, right? He's like, found a new place to dwell. And then when he leans over, he's like, checked into the SmackDown. Mankind pops up and then just shoves his whole Mr. Sacco fist in The Rock's mouth. And then The Rock sells it really well. So he's like, the SmackDown. And so it's just like, it's so fucking funny.
I think The Rock is the perfect person to sell the mandible claw. Like, he is the seller that the mandible claw deserves, because he's just a fucking big, dumb cartoon character. So The Rock is down from the mandible claw. Mankind, unfortunately, knocked Earl Hebner out. So there's a little bit of time before Earl comes to. The Rock gets up at 8. So we're in the last moments of this match, and these two dudes are exhausted. Mankind slides 2 more mandible claws in. The Rock gets a rock bottom in. They are exhausted. They are on opposite sides of the ring. Each man has access to a chair. They stand up, they whip around, and then they end up hitting each other in the head with the chairs at the exact same time, and they both crumble.
It feels like 2 nights jousting, and they both 100%. Just immediately, ugh. It's a total crash and burn moment. On that replay, you see The Rock hit the ropes, and he just like gets tangled up and then just fucking falls onto a chair. It looks so nasty.
It is super nasty, and it's nasty enough to leave them both on the ground for longer than 10 seconds. And in fact, they were on the ground for so long that they are both pulled out of the arena in gurneys.
And here's the thing, Sammy, this match is ruled a no contest, which means... Mankind wins! He keeps the championship!
Good job, Mankind! We're shown footage of these guys getting into ambulances, and we see... I don't know, I couldn't understand what was happening, or what was coming out of Mankind's mouth, but like his idle hand puppet, mandible claw arm just kept on Mr. Saccoing up.
The next night on Monday Night Raw, obviously... the corporation, The Rock, is pissed. And so they're like, we're doing a rematch literally right now. So the night after they had this brutal last man standing match, they have a fucking ladder match to decide who's the real champion. And so the distinction is whoever becomes the champion is going to face Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania. So during this match, Stone Cold Steve Austin is on commentary, just roasting the hell out of everybody involved. And so you're watching these, it's almost like a part two. It's a continuation. You would not think these guys went through a last man standing match. The foot is on the gas and they are just going nuts. But while it's happening, you just get to see like, Mankind's a tough son of a bitch, but like I wouldn't mind beating the Rock's at like just the whole time.
Oh God, Stone
just
Cold.
like really roasting the hell out of him. It was like, oh, we got yet another guy who's really good at talking in the mix.
Yeah.
And so everybody is just talking so much shit. They're doing this absolutely incredible ladder match, and it builds to the Rock. He's climbing the ladder, and the Mankind pops up and he puts Mr. Sacco in the Rock's mouth, and the Rock just like starts to pass out. He's about to fall off the ladder. And then who should appear but Paul White?
What?
The Big Show? A debuting Big Show was coming out as a tool of the corporation, and he did all this to screw over Mankind and allow The Rock to unfortunately pick up the title, and he gets out of this. And so getting into the epilogue, right? So obviously The Rock goes on to face Stone Cold at WrestleMania, and then that immediately puts Mankind into a feud with The Big Show, where it goes all the way to WrestleMania, where they have a match to decide who will be the special guest referee between Stone Cold and The Rock. Mankind wins, meaning Mankind goes to the main event of WrestleMania, where he helps Stone Cold Steve Austin beat The Rock.
All I have for you is one question about Paul White. When he came in, was it, well, first?
He wasn't the Big Show yet. It was like... It was truly, everybody kept calling him Paul White. And so he wasn't even the Big Show yet. So it was just like, it wasn't the Giant. He wasn't anything. So he came in and it was just like, what is Paul White doing here? And you're like, who the fuck is Paul White? Like, I don't know who that is.
I don't know. Who is this?
That was one of those things as a kid. I remember being like, well, I mean, he looks very intimidating, but I don't know who the hell this is. Like, I don't know what this is.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you, did you get any insight on Mankind's debut? Because, he wears a mask. His name is different. Like, did any of the audience members know that it was Mick under there?
Absolutely. And
they did? Okay.
And depending on where he wrestled, there would be some times where he would get Cactus Chance. So, yeah, I mean, hardcore, diehard fans, Philadelphia fans,
they knew.
ECW fans, they knew who this was.
Our baby boy.
I think in a lot of ways he was able to reinvent himself. Samee. That was our Mankind episode.
Oh my gosh.
Final thoughts. How'd you feel?
I'm having such a good time digging into Mick Foley. I'm so glad that we both were able to watch his match with Shawn Michaels. He says it's one of his favorite matches. I think it's one of my favorite matches. He's just a special guy. And I said it earlier, like, we are so lucky that he didn't get lost in the mask. He didn't get lost in this crazy gimmick. He didn't get lost in this fucking cruel grounds that he was hired on kind of a bet. I'm hearing the piano music. I feel at peace.
It speaks to how good of a performer he is, how naturally talented he is, how smart in the wrestling business he is, and just smart in general, knowing how to handle and deal with people. And I mean, he was working with some gigantic egos, and he was able to position himself in such a way that no matter, even when he loses, he's able to win. And I think that's just like a genius strategy. And we know from his early days as Cactus Jack that that's been his philosophy since the very beginning. And it was just so nice to be like those lessons he learned early in his career, the confidence he gained being Cactus Jack directly fed into his ability to make this very difficult character, Mankind, work. He was able to make it so scary and disconcerting that it freaked me out, who was familiar with the Mankind character, and then was able to soften it to the point where he was on Boy Meets World and in Chef Boyardee commercials. And it was just every step of the way, people love him. Even with the mask, people love him. Even when he's Cactus Jack, people love him. People love him no matter what he does. Samee, I kind of want to keep this love fest going. So I think next week we should talk about his third persona, Dude Love. What do you say?
I say, yeah, man, let's do it.
Far out. So we just want to thank you for listening to Wrestling Academy Podcast, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Michael Classic, and you, Samee Junio. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Wrestling Academy Pod. You can send us an email at wrestlingacademypod@gmail.com.
Follow, rate, and leave a positive review wherever you get your podcast, but check out Spotify, where we have Q&As or polls for every episode. And please, if you have any information on Ween Kid, go go to our website, wrestlingacademy.university, to send in an anonymous tip or call the Ween Kid tip line and leave us a voicemail at 708-669-4512. Class was dismissed.
Have a nice day.